So we would like to know how Sean Chen, you being a winner of a Van Cliburn and released so many records of this classical standard composers that we all study. How did you make that improvisation become something that you also do aside from playing all these pieces? Because normally, if being a performer, there are certain repertoire that you have to learn. There's so much to learn, and how do you find room to improvise and do what you would like?
So my journey, you know, actually this ties into my uh, education in music. So I grew up, my parents loved music, but they weren't classically trained. Actually, they were more pop music. My dad played guitar in college, and folk guitar. Eric Clapton, James Taylor, Jim Croce. I don't know if you know those people. Very American kind of '70s music, and I grew up listening to that stuff. And he would play on the guitar, and I learned how to read those guitar books. And I also watched lots of Disney movies, played lots of video games, and once I started learning, taking piano lessons, sometimes I didn't want to practice, so I'd sit down and just play for fun, and try to be at the piano, even though I didn't really want to practice. So I, started to play by ear that way. I have perfect pitch, I think, or really good, either perfect pitch or really good relative pitch. My wife likes to yell at me for my horrible pitch sometimes, but when you play by ear, I think that's a good first step to improvisation, because you can't possibly play exactly correct, right? So you have to kind of make up some stuff, whether it's the left hand with exactly what harmonies or what inversion it is. You kind of have to try things and figure it out. What's really nice about pop music and video game music and movie music is there are sheet music out there, right? So if you try to play by ear and you can't figure it out, or you need a little help, you can find the music and see how far you are. And sometimes the opposite is true too. You have the music and you play through and you go, that doesn't sound quite like the recording or like the right chord. And so if you listen then to the recording and you go, okay, let me try to figure out what chord, and you actually do a little ear training for yourself that way. You kind of figure out what that chord sounds like and how it feels on the piano, what it's going to be like. You just try different things until you get closer and closer to it. So that's kind of one of the ways that I didn't make it a point when I was a kid to like do it. It's just naturally, when you have instrument and you like to play around, then you kind of learn how to improvise that way. I think as I got older, then and you learn theory, you learn how music actually works. Then you can start to, for example, if you're playing a Rachmaninoff piece, right, and you have this cool chord, and you go, oh, I really want to be able to understand that chord and play it in my improvisation. So you actually sit down and say, okay, what kind of chord is it? Is it half diminished? Okay, how does he get there? How does he go away from there? And you actually kind of like incorporate these chords and progressions that you like from other composers, from the famous accomplished composers that you like, and you start to incorporate them into your improvisation. So it wasn't something that I sat down and was like, I'm going to learn how to improv. It was just something that was part of growing up and not wanting to practice, and so I just found different ways to be at the piano. Obviously, my dad playing guitar, I knew how to play the guitar. There's when you have some of that pop music experience, then you do improvise and play by ear more, and then just once I started doing stuff professionally, just kind of forcing myself to do some of these improvisation things, even though it can be uncomfortable. So I have, for example, as a what's it called, encore for an orchestra performance, I'll ask the violins and the violin, viola, cello to give me 4 notes, and then I'll do an improv on that, in front of the audience, and that's kind of scary, but also kind of fun. I haven't worked up the courage to improvise a cadenza yet. I have written cadenzas. I write lots of cadenzas, but most of they're all written out. I have maybe few sections of like improvisation in there, but mostly written out. So I think it's just kind of, for me, part of being a pianist. Like as I grew up and played the piano, playing by ear was, and improvising was a big part of it. I think also in high school, emotionally, when you when you're in high school, you're very lots of hormones, right? And you want to be emo, and want to be sad, and sometimes like just sitting and improvising your mood is very nice. And even now when I have time, just this improvise, it's about listening to your head and letting your fingers go. And yeah, we can talk more about specifics, other questions, but that's kind of how I started improvising, was at a young age, and no formal training, just playing for fun, and continue to play for fun.
Oh, that's great. So you started improvisation as a trial and error, just something fun to do, just to take time of practice, and you discovered something that eventually you could develop into a more professional standard, which did you actually write it out and work with the publisher? So some of the people, if they like your arrangement, they could get it from a certain websites as you grow more professional.
Yeah, so for the arrangements, I've talked to some publishers. The thing is, publishers are interested in, at least most publishers are interested in getting the music out there so that people can enjoy it. They look at my arrangements and they say it's a little too hard. The audience for these things are select few, and so they said if you self publish, that's the easiest thing, because you can promote it yourself, and then that. So I've been working on an eShop for a long time, because I do the programming myself. But for now, I just tell people to email me on my professional, my business email, and then I go on PayPal. So there's seller protection, all that stuff. So everyone's transparent. But I put everything on Sibelius for all the arrangements on the software, and make it nice and pretty, hopefully, so that people can read it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever found like improvisation, sometimes you felt frustrated about it, or everything has just been going very well for you? Because there's some people who wanted to really to improvise. There are notes in our head, but sometimes we couldn't communicate with our fingers. Has that happened to most of us, right?
Yeah, I think, the fingers have a mind of their own, and I think it's important to sight read a lot of music too, to read a lot and listen to a lot of music. Obviously, practicing a lot. I know all of you are teaching or practicing, and that's really important. And in addition to improvising, just because I think, at least the improvisation I do is so much based on things I've heard already, like the sounds in my head, right? And I think there's a lot of, it's not just listening, but also when you read things, and especially if you read things you already know how it goes, then you're correlating like the ears to what you see on the page, not just like hearing a lot, but you want to connect this, right? You want to connect this and what you see, and also the fingers. I think, so I'm lucky because I have pretty good pitch, right? And I can do both ways. I can see a score, and I can pretty much hear in my head how it sounds, unless it's super super chromatic and like Carter or something very modern. But even then, I can kind of get an idea of how it sounds, and because of doing transcriptions and stuff, I've gotten really good at reading orchestral scores, and kind of I know how they sound, and I read the music, and I correlate those two things together. But because I have that pretty good pitch, then generally what I hear I can translate to fingers. The other thing is, and I don't know, I'm sure many of you have perfect pitch. The other thing is, just because you have perfect pitch doesn't mean you can hear a chord and know what it is, right? People with perfect pitch, we play a chord, you go, okay, it's an E, and then there's a G sharp, and then there's a C sharp, and then there's an A, and then you go, okay, that's an A major 7 chord, right? But I think what's more important is to think like a jazz pianist, where you hear it and you can almost like feel it in your hands or see it as a chord, not just you hear this note, this note, this note, this note, but you hear it and you go, oh, that's a major seventh chord, or that's a diminished seventh chord, or that's a major chord with a sharp four, or what it is, and that's really important, because when you're playing by ear or even improvising, you don't have time to think about those things, right? You don't have time to kind of listen and be like, okay, and what that note is, what that note is. You just have to kind of react and quickly know what those chords are. So, and that's what jazz pianists have, is really good identification of what the chord shape is. I think that's the easiest way to say it, is the shape of the chord. They don't have perfect pitch; it doesn't matter. They can, as long as they know their starting pitch, they can find their whole way around, because they know theory, they know chord progressions, and they also know what sounds like what. And that requires training. I that didn't come easy to me either. Actually, I remember very clearly actually which video game piece I was trying to play and learn how to play by ear. And I really sat on the computer and I loaded the MP3 on a audio software, and I just played it and then stopped, and then I went to the keyboard and tried different chords, and like, I'll go back, play it again. That's not quite right. And I literally just did that and trained myself, not because I wanted to necessarily have that skill, but because I wanted to play that piece. So a lot of times the motivation is not to be good at something. It's just I want to do this. There's a project you want to do. There's a certain thing you want to do, and that helps build skills for you to improvise more freely. So, everyone approaches it differently. I know jazz pianists spend a lot of time, excuse me, doing transcription, which is the same. I mean, they actually write down the solos that they want to write down. Like if you're listening to Art Tatum or Bill Evans or Keith Jarrett, and you really like this, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and you just sit down, you have the file. They have software that allows you to, play slowly, or even do a, Fourier transform spectral analysis, so you can kind of see what notes in there. It might not be 100% correct, but at least you can see. It can help you with that transcription. They sit down and they write it out. That chord. Oh, he has this note in there. Oh, that's why it sounds like that. Or oh, that's why it sounds like that. And that's kind of how you build the correlation between your brain and your ears and your fingers. So it does take a lot of work, but I think instead of just blindly going about it, if you have a piece you definitely want to play by or learn how to play by ear, that's a good jumping point, right? To force yourself to spend the time to kind of do that practice.
Okay, everything takes practice, as if with improvisation.
Yeah, I mean, unless you start at a young age, and then it obviously comes a little easier. But at some point, I did reach a point, when it's like, oh, my improvisations all kind of sound the same. How do I bring more into it, or how do I make it sound less like Asian pop music and more like, whatever goals you have as musicians, as you all know, we're always trying to get better. It's never stopped. So.
Is there certain genre in improvisation? Let's say I'm improvising in the style of Mozart, in the style of Liszt, in the style of Rachmaninoff, or jazz, or even those pop music. For any improviser to be good at, do you have to focus on certain genres, or it's just mixed here, a little bit here and there? And
I think it depends
on rule of thumb.
Yeah. Well, there's no rule of thumb. I use improvisation, and no, people don't improvise that much, so there's not really a rule of thumb. I think it just depends on what you are interested in, what you want to be good at. Dr. Robert Levin at Harvard, he does all the Mozart and classical style improvisation. He does cadenzas, he does variations. I've seen him do it live. It's pretty amazing. But I don't know if he would be able to do jazz improvisation. It doesn't matter. He doesn't want to, I think, do that stuff. So I think maybe I'm more like modern and American that way, which is like you do what you want. I mean, if you don't, when you're a student, obviously your teacher makes you practice these things. They think that's fine. But when you're a professional, or it's your hobby, or you're trying to learn new things, I think it's important to do stuff you're interested in, because we have a limited number of hours a day and a lot of things we need to do. So if if we have time to learn something new, then it's good to learn something that you want to learn, that makes you happy, you know. So I think certain improvisation styles will require more practice, which I think classical style would. I mean, because you have more boundaries, right? You have more restrictions. You can't do whatever you want. There are more structural like elements. Use the left hand. You know, you have to consider maybe even the range of the piano of their pianoforte at the time. You know, this doesn't have, it's not like all the keys we have, and so there's that. And if you want to improvise like Bach, then you start to think the counterpoint is very important. Avoiding parallel fifths, you have to do lots of practice writing four-part harmony, writing fugues, or improvising fugues. I mean, I know people in school that knew how to improvise fugues, but I can't imagine doing that. Yeah, but just having even that style is very very difficult because you're more limited. Now, if you start improvising like Rachmaninoff or Chopin or Scriabin, then you have a lot more freedom. It's still hard, I think, to emulate another composer style, but it's definitely easier once you get later in the Romantic era. And then once you get to jazz and modern, then you just whatever you can incorporate all different kinds of styles. So it's definitely easier to be pan-stylistic. It's definitely harder and requires more practice to be restrictive and disciplined about your improvisation.
Right. So are you going to share your improvisation pieces? You're going to talk about it before we show the video?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I just want a couple of I know a lot of people have come to me and be like, oh, I really want to improvise, and how do I start? And especially when you're older, it can be very difficult to like find a process. There aren't really many books, I don't think, of how to improvise. So there are, I think it was, so I have 2 kids, I have 1 newborn, and I listen to these days a lot of nursery rhymes, right? And so I don't want to use my piano downstairs because it's loud, but I have my keyboard here, and I think you can hear that. Can you? Yeah. Okay. So I will sit farther back so you can kind of see.
We can't see the keyboard now.
Yeah, I will move my zoom out a little bit back again. Okay. Let's see. My headphones are not quite working. Okay. So this is a very ad hoc setup. I'm sorry. Okay. So one of the ways to do is, for example, let's take Chopin. Sorry, my octavation is different. So if you practice this piece, I think it's good practice to make it simple. Just play. You're just blocking the chords, but even doing that is a bit of, is kind of not what you see on the page, right? So you have to think a little. So, okay, so let's do this even simpler. It's just block. Very easy. It doesn't sound very good, but okay. And then and I got this set of techniques from actually another professor who does improvisation. First thing you should do is just feel comfortable adding ornaments. Okay, and then maybe you get a little bit more daring, and not just ornament, but kind of change the shape a little bit. It's not very good. It's not better than Chopin, but you get kind of a little bit more adventurous, and keep the left hand. What your simplified version, keep it the same. Yeah. And sometimes I even like to just take that, the normal way, and make it more like pretend like you're transcribing it for orchestra, for list or. Just kind of like you roll chords, add stuff, pretend like your list. Even do, yeah, have fun with it. I know, well, Chopin will be rolling in his grave. He doesn't care. He's dead. So there's one way to do that, and then even making stuff, changing major and minor can be, can sound very ugly, but it's good practice too. Start, it's just about getting used to playing not what you're supposed to play, and getting your ears thinking about what constitutes minor. And in your minor, do you play a major 4 or a minor 4? Things like that, and it just depends on, right? And a lot of it later on, when you learn theory or when you sit down and analyze, you go, oh, this is what I do. But when you're on the spot, your fingers are just doing it themselves, and you just have to trust them. And if you play something that doesn't sound good, it's fine. Roll with it. Now, one way to do from there is to keep now the right hand original and change the left hand. Maybe not even harmonies, just change the texture. And then maybe you can get I like to get my right hand involved too, doing accompaniments sometimes. And as I'm doing that, I'm kind of listening to it. It's not like I don't see like in my head these notes on the paper or anything. It's just kind of I hear these sixths going on. I hear things like that, and my fingers sometimes do random stuff. I'm like, oh, I didn't think that, but I can go with it. I now that it's kind of a play between your fingers going at it and then you listening to it and then reacting to it. So it's kind of a dialogue kind of between your left hand and right hand. I mean, sorry, your hand and your ears. Then you can, once you're comfortable with that, you can change the harmonies. So I was kind of doing like a pedal tone on the tonic the whole time. You can even try to relative minor. So that's not the originally we were doing parallel minor. This is relative minor. Yeah. You can even do something more extended, like some half diminished chords. Kind of keeping a little bit the same contour in the melody, but just whatever. I didn't know what I was doing. Just choosing chords that you don't really expect. And then kind of the same last thing about this, last thing you could do is to really change the rhythm and character of it. You know, you can even do like, let's see, what is it? That Coldplay song with that, like, how does it go? It's like, everyone know this? So you can, so it's kind of, but you have to force yourself to do kind of things a little bit as an exercise. Um, Actually, a piece that's really good to do this with is the Goldberg variations, because that's basically what Bach did. He takes the ground bass and he writes 30 variations. So if you sit down and figure out what the, then you can, you just need to do that. And jazz pianists love doing that. And then jazz pianists love Bach because it's so harmonic and you can do so much with it. So that's just kind of, before we go into transcriptions, just want to share. And I do this a lot, but I first heard it in a talk by one of my colleagues at UMKC. And he does a lot of improvisation that's maybe less common practice than I do. He does more like electronics improvisation and things. But he gave a talk to students, and he took some Beethoven piece, and he pretty much said the same thing. Start just changing one thing at a time, so that you don't get too overwhelmed, right? But you still allow yourself a little creativity. Sometimes I even like, if there's certain things in Mozart where, especially in slow movements, he oftentimes doesn't write out the ornamentation, but you can tell because it's very bare bones. He just gives you like quarter notes. That's a perfect place for you to sit down and don't write it out yet, but like try to play, improvise, see what you could come out with, and then you can write it down for the next time you play it. So that's a good place to stop for me for the improvisation. Good. So transcriptions actually, for me, came out of the improvisation. So I love orchestral repertoire. I studied violin when I was in elementary school, middle school, because I wanted to play an orchestra, youth orchestra, and I love being in the orchestra because I love the music we played. Because I love the music, sometimes I want to play on the piano, right? So I would go home and I didn't have the scores at that time. There was no IMSLP, so I didn't have the scores to this music. So I'd sit down and try to play by ear stuff like and that's Beethoven 7, last movement, but just doing that, you're already kind of transcribing, right? And because you're picking what's important to your ears and what isn't. And I think that's a very crucial part of transcribing is it's not, the final product is not about putting all the notes from whatever original piece it is into the piano and then trying to play all of it. The final product is you want people to listen to it and be like, this sounds so much like the orchestra. I can hear all the different colors. Sometimes actually even people tell me on the piano when I play stuff, they're like, oh, I can hear the voices so much better or the counterpoint so much better, because obviously, it's easier for one person to control things than it is for 80 people to bring out things like that. So that's important. It's important, I think, in transcription to study whatever piece too, by transcribing it. But as we know, Bach did lots of transcriptions. He studied Froberger and Buxtehude and all these other composers by doing arrangements. That's how they, studied composing and other composers back then. Mozart did so many arrangements of Bach, J.C. Bach, and I think C.B. Bach pieces. His earlier concertos are all arrangements of sonatas. and then he kind of adds sonata form and more classical style to it. And then obviously as we get to Romantic era, Schumann did transcriptions. He transcribed some Bach, he transcribed some Paganini. Brahms obviously did lots of transcriptions. We don't have to talk about Liszt or Busoni, Bartok. Yeah, they all did transcriptions. I mean, Ravel did so many transcriptions of his own stuff. And I think it's so natural because, especially back then, most composers played their instrument, played an instrument well, whether it's violin or piano or viola. And when you have an instrument you feel so comfortable with, even if you write an orchestral piece or whatever, sometimes you want to play that on your instrument so that you can enjoy it. And then, and then also you can publish that and make some more money, and that's important too. So I think it is important to do the transcriptions. Nowadays it's not so important for bringing the piece to the public because everyone can hear these pieces on YouTube. So it's not so important as if we're talking about Liszt and doing the Beethoven symphony transcriptions. He was not only doing them for, I don't think he was really doing them for performance. I think he was mostly doing it so that people could play it in their homes. Obviously they're very difficult, but that's easier than trying to get a ticket to go see an orchestra back then. Whereas nowadays you can, everyone has heard and all of the symphonies a billion times. So, good. I can share my screen for a couple of things. I'll just kind of give you a couple examples of how I. Let's see, where's my share screen? All right. We might have to. Okay. Let's see. Does this work? Can you see? I have a YouTube, or I have two PDFs up. Is that visible? Yeah. All right. So we'll start with the Lavals. So this was the first actual big arrangement I did. And I did it because I always felt that the solo piano version, at least on the page, seemed very sparse. Now, when you listen to anyone's performance of Lavals, they always add stuff. I mean, he adds, if you, let's see, move this. This is hit on the right is Ravel's version, right? He adds, he got some glissandos there that he couldn't put in. He has this noodly stuff in the clarinet that he's like, oh, I can't fit it in. You'll just have to figure it out. So things like that. And then after you get all that stuff done, you might as well have done your own arrangement anyways. So I was inspired by that. I was inspired just by, I love how the orchestra version sounds. It's so much color, so exciting, and something about, I think, the theme of the piece La Valse, with the kind of chaotic and kind of decomposing society as he's writing about, is like, it can't be too easy. It has to kind of a little bit feel like it's falling apart in your fingers. And I think that's part of the challenge I like of doing this arrangement. It's not the first arrangement. It's definitely won't be the last one. Glenn Gould has an arrangement he did of La Valse. There's a Russian professor. I don't think recent. I think maybe early 1900s, or like mid 1900s. This piece is early 1900s, like mid 1900s. His name is Ikarev, and I have a PDF of his. It's like unplayable because it's so dense, but I was inspired by that to do a version of my own that I would be able to work on and play. So I wanted to just give an example maybe of a big easy to spot difference. So this section, so we're starting here. And on my score, this starts, can I get a toolbar? Oh, geez. Select, I guess I can't really select that way. But this is the top line, fifth measure. Sorry, you'll hear it in the performance, but I have all these arpeggios. I really kind of wanted that harp to really come through, and it kind of reminds me of, Bark, all these arpeggios, or Ondine, what is it? Oh man, that's this kind of arpeggiation is very Ravel-ish. Now, if you look at the Ravel version, he's got some, but whereas mine is a lot more involved, and I kind of wanted that like sweeping, very luscious sound in it. One thing I'm proud of, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to demonstrate on this keyboard because it's not enough keys on it, but that would be here, Ravel, right? But if you listen to the orchestra, there's this really cool, it goes like, kind of like this harp kind of thing, and this is on the left side on my version. This is the second line, third measure. So obviously when it gets faster, I mean, it's very challenging because you have to voice it and really make sure the thing really sparkles. I'm not sure my performance is 100% good there, but it's a goal to get it like that. But I think this is the fun part about doing transcriptions. It's kind of like a Sudoku puzzle. It's like you want to put in the things you want to put in. How do you make it work? How do you make it playable up to tempo, right? And that takes a lot of iteration. I write stuff down. I go to the piano. I try it out and I go, okay, my fingers naturally, and this is where improvisation kind of helps too. My fingers naturally want to do this. Okay, I sit back, I go back and I change it. I go, does that fit? Does that sound good? Okay, and I do this revision. So all my arrangements take a long time to do because it's just a constant revising and editing. I mean, I think Laval's took me I wrote it down in like a summer, but then it took me, well, this is my first transcription. I was afraid to play it in public. It took me like 3 years before I got the courage to learn it and play it in public. So, just a little demonstration here, where I said he doesn't even try to put it in there. So on the left side is the top line on the screen after the double bar where it changes to E5 major. So I tried to put all that stuff in there, yeah. So yeah, that's let me see what else kind of thing. Okay, go to the next. Sorry, it's split into 2 files, so I have to. Uh-oh. Sorry, I just have to wait for my computer to respond. Okay. Yeah. So a good example of like what you hear versus what you see on the page. I'm gonna put it on the top line. On the left here, this right there. These 3, if I can highlight them, 3 chords here. Bum 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 bum. You hear that really prominently in the recording. Let's see if we got cymbal crashes. But on Ravel's version, we got nothing. We got, that's just kind of those little things where it's like, I know, I hear it, I check in the score, it's there, and I think it's important to, and it helps, you can imagine you can build up more sound with these chords. than you can trying to just trill harder and faster, right? So you know, for me, this La Valse, actually, this, at least my version, is about sound, about this kind of very overwhelming sound. Now, what's interesting, I'll show you something interesting, and this shows you like my revising goes on even till. So in the recording, you'll hear I play basically the original version. I add another note, but I add another note there. But I recently, in like the last 3 years, I found out I could do this, which more accurately represents what the flute is doing. And I can add also the tremolos by doing. It's easier to actually do on a real piano. The keyboard is so light. But with all that sound, you can actually get the effect of that, because you do hear this really prominently recording, just like this piccolo screaming away. And so, obviously, you can, it's very exciting to, but I think it's even more exciting to go. So that's what I'm always trying to do. Yeah, that's kind of example. Okay, the next piece I want to talk a little bit about is the Mozart Marriage of Figaro overture. And this is kind of a cool arrangement for me because I explored a lot with, because there's no, version out there already really for solo piano. And I used there's a lot of repeated notes in the Marriage of Figaro because there's a lot of tremolos, when they're playing in the orchestra. It's not repeated notes, it's just like, it is repeated notes, but for them it's easy, right? It's easy to tremolo. It's much easier than for us to play that. But you can get a lot of that effect by using some tremolo like this, and I figured out I actually am comfortable doing with the left hand. 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1. I think that feels okay for me. So there's a lot of that in here, and then when I get to, thirds are hard, but if you can use your left hand to help you, sweet. You can use your left hand to help, and then you have some of these, which is just the. Sorry, let me move this because you can barely see my keyboard. Gonna doing that kind of stuff, and it's hard to write virtuosic stuff that works. I think for the La Valse, it's like the La Valse was more. I was trying to put as many notes in the piece as possible, and still be able to play it and get the color I want. This one was really essence of it, but you have to get that brilliance in there. So there's something, to kind of figure out what fingerings work for that. And then I think my favorite part is starting from here down, which is getting that tremolo with both fingers. Sorry, the keyboard lags and I can barely play these fast enough. But you can get good repetition there, and then you can also do the same thing actually. That it kind of gives you a pretty good instead of which is it has activity, but if you can get that repeated note there, it's a lot easier. Not easier. It's a lot more exciting. Same thing here, which I think is cool, and that is. I'll play it slowly. Oh, geez, I haven't played this in a while. What is it? So you can see the melody is shared between the two hands as well as the repeated notes. So you kind of, physically it's not that hard to play. You just go like this, but it sounds impressive. And then we get a little bit of this reminds me of the Stravinsky etude. There's a Stravinsky piano etude where he alternates like thirds. It sounds like thirds, but he skips. Is it a Stravinsky or Prokofiev? I don't know. Is it Prokofiev etude? It might be Prokofiev etude. But you can you can, it kind of sounds like, I mean, if ideally you should be able to play, but you know, obviously you have to play the bass. So you kind of, it's honestly a little bit like an illusion, a magic trick sometimes with transcriptions. You have to give the sense of all this stuff happening while still be able to play it. So you kind of have to leave things out. And what you leave out versus what you don't, I think sometimes that's also where the improvisation comes into play. Like your ears and your fingers, if they're in tune, they'll naturally do some stuff that I wouldn't be able to figure out if I sat here and never touched the piano and just tried to do an arrangement. It would never be this good or this creative. My fingers have a mind of their own, and I think because they've played so many pieces, and I think it's good to trust them. So I just want to talk about, you'll hear it too. I want to talk about this because I was proud of figuring things out and making it sound that way. The last one I want to talk about is I did this for, last year was Beethoven's year, and I was asked to play the Liszt version of the Ninth Symphony last movement, and I played through it. And let me find where the fourth movement starts. The third movement. Okay, that's the third movement. Okay, there. And I thought, well, it's quite difficult, the Liszt version, and some parts of it don't even sound that good or like what I expect it to sound like. And which makes sense. I doubt Liszt had more than a handful of chances to ever hear the Ninth Symphony in his life. Whereas we probably hear it, if you go to concerts, you probably hear it once a year, right? The orchestras love to play Beethoven 9. And that's not to mention that you can hear it anytime you want on YouTube, on CD, on whatever, right? On Spotify. So we, I think, as an audience, as musicians, know so much better how the symphony is supposed to sound, or how it sounds in practice, than Liszt did. And I think then that means we're in a uniquely advantaged position to redo a transcription so that it sounds more like what we have gotten used to it sounding. In addition to that, there have been research and all these things done throughout the years, definitely since Liszt was alive, that have discovered performance indications from the parts that were used during the premiere and things like that. So just as an example, the famous melody part, where you have this right this okay, that we all know. Now when the second verse comes, and that's on the right on the top here, and that will be here where the treble staff comes in. So this is Liszt. Now if you notice the left hand is only one line, and on mine I have an octave going on. And that's because in the actual written part, it is just one line. It just says, what's written in the Liszt one. But they discovered performance indications from the premiere that said that the bassoon, in Beethoven's handwriting, he says the bassoon should double the bass in this section an octave up. And so that's why I've written. It's a very subtle thing, but I think if you listen to a modern recording of this, you will hear a little bit more thickness in the bass, right? Another part after this, and you'll hear it in the performance, but I don't think I can demonstrate on this piano. Okay, this is at letter C on the right here, and this is I'll put on the top staff there. So Liszt is, and I can barely play this, left hand jumps way too much. What is it? So I saw that and I go, wait, but the melody is okay, now there he comes back. This so he comes, but he kind of leaves out the melody in the middle. Da 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 da. Right? If you start at C, da da dee dee, and he doesn't. He goes da dum ba dum be dum ba dum ba dum, and that's what the strings have. That's true. But that's not, if you listen to the symphony, you keep singing da da dee dee da da dee 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 da dee da 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 da, right? So I tried to, and maybe I'll try to demonstrate what I did, but you'll see in the performance better. So I tried to do both, right? I have, and then but I also have, so we get, and then it gets a little bit more like, but also the left hand, I didn't want, those octaves really just, that, you know, Liszt loves his octaves. I prefer not to do octaves. I rather do running notes more. If I practice them, but it adds more excitement. So that's kind of an example of like how I, you know, the whole thing is rearranged. But those kinds of things are important to me. Is, does it sound like what I am expecting it to sound like? Another part that I'm proud of. Sorry, this is kind of like just show and tell for me, and I'm it'll feel a little bit like I'm bragging, but is this this triple fugue? And Liszt does he puts the running notes up. Oh, sorry. But in the score, in the actual version, it is in the same register as the melody. And I kind of figured out a way where you can take the melody, you alternate right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand, and it actually works very well and feels really good to play. And so I was really happy that worked out, because, you know, when you're doing a piece like this, right, you start the beginning, but in your head you're already worrying about like, how am I going to do that? Because it's so there's so many voices. I want to capture this idea, and when you do get to the point you can work it out, it's like, it's a lot of fun. Okay, yeah, you have some stuff here where it's impossible. The Liszt version is, at least on a modern piano, I think is impossible to play. Like this stuff. Oh man. You know, with the left hand. Oh man. I mean, I tried really hard, but what I ended up doing was my you know, kind of same thing as Busoni did, right? Alternate every other note. And then I added some color. The flutes come in here, whereas Liszt doesn't do that, you know, because it's more of a color. But I like it, that brightness coming in. This part on the left hand, or on the left here, you'll see the Liszt actually version is a lot harder because he writes these double thirds that are impossible to play. Where we can find it. Yeah, look at that string of double thirds. And this is fast. I mean, you're going. And so I've done kind of a similar thing where I alternate every other note. Here, same thing. I want to hear. He writes the the vocal part in, but he doesn't put it in the piano. I want to hear dum, bum bum. Bum bum bim bim bum 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 da 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 da. And but if you play the Liszt version, he just has these octaves going triplets, and it doesn't really sound like how I want it to sound. So I've kind of added, I've kind of done my best to put the orchestra version into piano, basically, making it as festive as possible, as faithful as possible, but also, making sure we hear what we expect to hear from the Beethoven 9 as the piece we know. One thing that I've had to learn doing transcriptions is that just because a note on the original is on a certain octave doesn't mean it sounds good on that same octave on the piano. So if you're playing on the cello and it's high, it could be just a middle A, but for them it's like, and so sometimes we have to put it higher so it sounds like, it has the same kind of effect. Or sometimes putting stuff to take with the left hand has a different effect than just playing with the right hand, right? It's kind of like playing the Chopin, what did I say? The cello etude, Opus 25, number 7, where the stuff was on the left hand. Yeah. So that's just kind of a couple of things. So I will play, we'll see if I have time, but I want to play the La Valse. I kind of want to play Beethoven for you. I don't know if we have time. That's about like 30 something minutes together. But I think it's pretty enjoyable. So hopefully it's enjoyable for you guys too. Should we do questions afterwards then? Should we do the
Sure, yeah.
performance?
Got a lot of questions to ask.
Sure, yeah. So let me do this. And let me. Do you want to look? I'll do it on this screen so you guys can look along with the score. It'll be fun. Let me do the option to optimize for. Okay. All right. Let me try. I just want to try and make sure you guys can hear the video. I'll play somewhere in between. Okay. Let me see. Where are you guys? Okay. I just want to see a nod of whether you can hear this. Can you hear it?
Good.
Okay, great. Sweet. Okay. All right. Now I will do this optimize for video clip. All right. So let's start. I will. Oh yeah, I should mute myself so you don't hear my air conditioning.
Bravo. Bravo, bravo.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, so you'll notice, I've revised it since then. This was five, oh, 5 years ago now. And I've played it a couple times since, but and I've revised some stuff. So, but yeah, it's a lot of fun to listen to. I think, you know, it's fun to play, but I think I'm glad that it sounds as good as it does, because it could easily sound not very good. I think. Okay, so let's do the Beethoven, and let me get that score out. All right. I'll mute myself, and here we go.
Bravo, bravo. How did you manage to do that? Amazing. Thank you so much, Sean,
Wow.
for sharing with us.
Of course. Here, let me stop this share. Yeah, I mean, thanks for listening. It's
Amazing
it's good for me to
performance.
revisit these things too, and I'm like, oh, I need to fix some stuff. But anyways, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you for sharing how you found improvisation as a way out of practice and eventually grew. And you play by ear a lot, and you study a lot of composition. And at the end, you can transcribe the pieces. So I guess all of us here who are wondering what is arrangement, what is called transcription, those are two really different things, but they grow out of one thing, which is called play by ear, learning to discover the pieces that you really like. There's not really rules. So you can, listen as much music as you can, be exposed to as much genres as you can. The most important thing is to find enjoyment, because they're no two persons the same. They might be from the same teacher, same studio, but they both have different likes of the kind of music they like to improvise. So
I think the coolest thing about the improvisation and transcription is no one else can do the same thing you do. I mean, even if they do the same piece, they will come up with different solutions.
I'm really amazed by the way you do la valse, because a lot of pianists was like saying la valse, they were like intimidated by the amount of notes that Ravel himself already put in the score. So I don't know how you actually managed to put even more than what Ravel's already written. I mean, for you at the end, it's the sound that really matters, because you're not going to sacrifice because of just convenience so that everybody can play. And then I just make it easy. The end is really that sound that you want to make. And truly, piano is truly an orchestral instrument. There's endless possibilities that you could adjust any kind of sound and using pedals and all kinds of tricks. So you did really amazing. And I think you can find the rest of the that you didn't play for us today. Of course, the rest symphonies of number 9 is there. And the overture to the Magic Flute also is there too, right? And the valse. So
Figaro. No, so, a bunch of there's a Rachmaninoff and stuff. If you look on my channel, there's a bunch of stuff.
That's great.
So
thank you so much. And you have the transcription. Anything is available on your website if any of us want to.
Yeah, you'll have to email me. Right now, the website is not, the shop part is not up, so there's nothing there. So you'll have to just email me personal. My Sean Chen at seanchenpiano.com.
Okay, and he got an Instagram too, so you can find him. So
I got all the stuff. I'm not very good at it, but I got all the social media stuff.
Yeah, okay, that's good. It keeps you focused and keep doing and writing those. And the thing with because right now it's so easy for us to find anything on IMSLP, that actually makes us a bit lazy too. Okay, I have to write my own, and also you have to find nowadays what kind of software. It's not just a matter of okay, I have an idea, then I need to write it down. I think a lot of us has to learn at some point if you want to transcribe some computer software that you have to get used to.
Yes, Sibelius is a bit both Finale and Sibelius, and I think the new one Doroco or something. That all of these software you just have to spend some time. Unfortunately, the older you are, the less time you have to spend, to learn these things. So I think really. Paper and pencil. I mean, I have all my stuff, just like random sketches or whatever. I don't even know. I write a lot, and sometimes with the valse. Actually, I don't know where it is, but I had the whole thing written out when I was first doing it, and then I put it in Sibelius, and it's much different now. But at least I did write it out in the beginning. Yeah,
that's really amazing. And I remember you mentioned it took you 3 years to transcribe that it really turns out really well.
I mean, if you count the revising and stuff, it's like many more years continuing.
But it's amazing.